And good morning, everybody. My name is Hassan Sorrells, and welcome to Addressing Workplace Incivility in a Time of Remote Work, part of the Hsct webinar series. So this morning, this is the second of our 3 webinars in our series. Today, we're going to be talking about how to address and what are the best practices for addressing workplace incivility. Now, workplace incivility is a common problem and becoming more common all the time. As we look at how folks have adapted to remote work, how folks have adapted to being in remote environments, one of the things that we have to consider is how do folks address and deal with issues and instances of workplace incivility. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. We are going to really focus on what is number one, what is workplace incivility? We're going to define that, right? We're going to define sort of what that behavior is. We're going to define how that behavior manifests itself, and we're going to define how that behavior is dynamic, right, in the environments that we find ourselves working in these days. We're also going to look at and we're going to examine why is it that certain parts of workplace behavior, certain pieces of workplace incivility are allowed to continue. Why is it that the behavior that's thoughtless or rude or just simply unprofessional has been allowed to continue over time in many organizations and been allowed to grow into an epidemic? Finally, we're going to look at how does this expensive but solvable problem translate into a world of remote work? How does that translate into a remote environment, right? How does that translate into, the areas that we are in right now? What does that look like when you have to engage with people that may not necessarily have your best interests at heart? How does it look when you have to engage with folks that are really focused around being rude and discourteous to you? How does it work when you have to deal with people who are engaged in workplace incivility? All right, so these are a lot of different areas that we are going to be covering and a lot of different topics that we're going to be covering today, and we're going to do that in about an hour and a half. Now, as usual, as last time, we do have a participant workbook for you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click File, and then we're going to pull that up, and I'm going to get that to you right now in the Zoom group chat. As was last time in our first webinar, the group chat is the spot for you to be able to talk to me, right? It's the spot for us to be able to exchange information. If you don't want to come on the webinar, if you don't want to talk to me directly, which again is fine. If you don't want to come on, you can always type up a question for me in the group chat. You can always challenge me there. And of course, I use that as an opportunity to riff and to talk about things and to talk about issues that are important around not only this topic, but just in general to you. So your participant handout should be coming to you right now, and it should be available to everyone here in the group chat. So you can go ahead and download that. And that features, of course, our key talking points and our key takeaways from this session today. All right. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to share our screen. So you're going to get to see my slides. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. If you have any questions about my slides, if you have any questions about my PowerPoint presentation, if you have any questions about anything that I've got up so far, please don't hesitate to again, utilize that chat area to kind of talk to me about those things, right? To address those issues with me. Now, as we did last time, on our last webinar, we're going to go through, what is the agenda for today? What are we actually going to cover? What are some objectives? I already introduced myself previously, and so I will take an opportunity to briefly introduce myself again. And of course, what do you do for troubleshooting, technical difficulties, things like that on this webinar? So once again, our agenda is to really look at workplace incivility and really break that down for folks today. How do we effectively understand why common courtesy is not so common anymore? How do we understand and pull apart cycles of disrespect, cycles of disengagement, cycles of dysfunctional communication? How do we identify the 7 warning signs of incivility in the workplace? How do we have a civil conversation, particularly remotely? How do we have a civil conversation in a remote environment where people may not necessarily be willing or be able to have that civil conversation with us? How do we deal with drama and gossip and storytelling? How do we deal with those very corrosive elements that impact how we do what we do? And finally, what is the 5-step plan for really not only addressing workplace incivility, but potentially beginning the process of changing a workplace culture? So that's our agenda for today. Some objectives, I've already kind of gone over that, but, really looking at what is workplace incivility, really giving that a definition, really pulling that down and defining that. And of course, really looking at how has that behavior, how has that communication styling spread over the course of the last 20 to 30 years. Now, don't get me wrong, people have always been in civil, right? This isn't anything new, but how is it that it has become endemic in our workplace cultures? Now, of course, I introduced myself previously on our first webinar, and this being our second webinar. For those of you who didn't join us the first time, I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce myself. So my name is Hsct. I am the CEO of Human Services Consulting and Training. We are a remote video-first e-learning company. We service small and medium-sized businesses, and we would love to help you out. So you can go ahead and check us out on www.hsconsultingandtraining.com. And you can also check out our new leadership platform, Leading Keys, really designed to help you become a better leader. And you can check us out at www.leadingkeys.com. And don't worry, we're going to have a few ads here today during our breaks. So you'll be able to take in more information on Leading Keys, on our customized remote training opportunities, and of course, on our Leadership Toolbox Masterclass, which gives you an opportunity to really get in front of me personally and really find out what it is that can make you a better leader. All right, if you have any webinar or technical problems or any technical issues, if they are on the Zoom end of this webinar today, I would encourage you to reach out, go to zoom.us and really reach out to them and have a conversation with them, because I can't really help you out with that. However, if you have any technical issues on your end, if you have any technical issues with your internet or with your organization, please, shut down that internet and pop right back in again. We'll be able to help you out. Make sure you keep that password. Make sure either if you signed in through Google, you use the same Google sign-in that you used before, the same SSO sign-in. If you came to us through Facebook, use the same sign-in that you used before. Or if you came into the invite, the password is inside of the invite at the end of the Zoom link. Okay. So we had some technical problems last time with some folks dropping off the webinar and then having trouble getting back in. And of course, your password for this webinar is at the end of the link that was in the invitation. All right, so that's just some troubleshooting things for today. That's just some minor technical kind of stuff. So let's jump right into the meat of the matter, right? Because when I do these webinars, I'm not just trying to show you what we can do here for you at Human Services Consulting and Training, how we can best help you. I'm also seeking to actually give you stuff that works. And so let's talk about the meat of the matter. Let's talk about giving you stuff that works. So one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves today, and we have to really think about this, is why has there been a rise in workplace incivility? Why has there been a rise in what is defined, not only according to Wikipedia, but according to many other researchers? Why has there been a rise in low-level deviant behavior with ambiguous intent to harm the target? And that's really the classical definition of workplace incivility. And you can write that down on your participant handout, or you can type it up if you have a Microsoft Word document open in front of you while you're listening to me today. Why has there been a rise in low-level deviant behavior with ambiguous intent to harm the target? Well, one of the key reasons there has been a rise in workplace incivility, actually, there are three key reasons why there has been a rise in workplace incivility. And by the way, this is a problem that costs U.S. businesses $300 billion per year, according to Society of Human Resource Management estimates and Human Capital Institute management estimates. $300 billion a year is not a small problem. Okay. Workplace incivility becomes the baseline that then leads into a lot of other problems, a pyramid of issues, actually, that goes into bullying, harassment, and then very often litigation. Workplace incivility is the lowest level area where a manager, a supervisor, a leader of any kind can really begin to, well, not be named as a co-defendant in a lawsuit, can really begin to start tackling harassment issues and issues of workplace problems, right? This is the place where everything begins. It's interesting, just doing a little bit of a riff here, kind of going off script a little bit. And that's okay. We're going to cover all the material anyway, just something that occurs to me that I've been saying over the last couple of weeks and months as racial and social unrest has spread across our country, and as organizations of all kinds, from Nike to Goodyear, from small and medium-sized organizations all the way to large multinational corporations, are seeking to figure out how exactly to put their arms around diversity and inclusion issues, there's something that occurs to me, and it's this. If you can't even get your people to be civil with each other as human beings, how are you going to overlay diversity and inclusion efforts into your organization? How are you going to overlay those difficult conversations? How are you going to overlay those issues of identity that go beyond just an EEOC document that we all sign to get the job, but that we don't actually read and comprehend, right? That we don't actually necessarily always think about as being the document that's going to drive what we do and where we go. How are you going to enforce that document if you can't even have a conversation around what is civil and what isn't? And again, with the rise in the acceptability of low-level deviant behavior, low-level deviant communication behavior with ambiguous intent to harm the target, with the rise in acceptability of that kind of behavior, issues around diversity and inclusion, issues around harassment and bullying, issues around dysfunctional communication become even more toxic with a lack of civility. So there are three reasons why there's been a core rise in workplace incivility that we can determine here at Human Services Consulting and Training from our time that we have spent in talking to managers and supervisors, close to 15,000 actually by this count, that are working in these spaces across all verticals. The biggest reason why there has been a rise in workplace incivility is because workplace environments have become places where more casual communications are tolerated and are encouraged. Look, work equaling life and life equaling work is something that has happened over the course of the last 30 to 40 years. And particularly when you're talking about nowadays with the development of remote work and remote work options, you're talking about the line between my work and my life being blurred. And work level communications are always second level communications, right? They're always second level interactions. They're not necessarily interpersonal the way they are with family, but they demanded in the past anyway a certain level of formality. And that formality has gone away. As our communications have become more casual, well, we've opened the door to begin to really talk to people the way we would talk to them if they were really our family members. We've opened the door to more conflict, not less. And we've opened the door permissively to more types of this incivil behavior, which allows us, which calls on us as leaders to make sure that we are actually monitoring the barrier between work and life. We are actually trying to figure out in really tactical ways what's casual and allowed and what's not. The next reason that workplace incivility is on the rise is that there's been an overall cultural shift in permissiveness around the acceptance of uncivil behavior, combined with a sense of urgency, right, around addressing past unaddressed problems. Remember, I mentioned diversity and inclusion issues, along with sexual harassment issues, general bullying issues, all these kinds of things that weren't addressed in the past, right? And discriminatory language and attitudes and postures. There's been a cultural shift, right? Look, most workplaces tend to trend conservative. They tend to trend conservative, not necessarily politically conservative. That's not what I'm talking about. But they tend to trend communication-wise in a conservative manner. And as the culture has radically shifted around what is permissive and what is not, what is allowed and what is not. And by the way, social media has been a huge driver for this, and everybody knows this, right? We mentioned this even in our previous webinar around conflict, but when you look at how people actually communicate in online environments, they communicate, well, quite permissively and quite frankly, quite incivilly. And when they do that, well, they translate those types of communication approaches and processes to work. And they do it without even really thinking about it. They do it without really considering what the impact of those kinds of behaviors and approaches might actually be. So work is equaling change now, just like work is equaling life. The final reason, the final sort of impetus for the rise in workplace incivility is this idea that generational expectations and assumptions about work and the culture outside of work and inside of work have shifted. Look, we don't live in the 1960s anymore. We don't live in the 1950s. We don't even live in the 1990s. As of this recording, we live in 2020. We are now at the beginning of the start of the second decade of the 21st century. Generations have shifted, whether we like it or not. And of course, we can have a discussion about, are those communication postures good or bad? And that might be a conversation worth having. But one thing we have to acknowledge is those shifts have occurred. And because those shifts have occurred, because our generational expectations and assumptions about what is communication and what isn't communication, what's civil and what's not, have also shifted, well, we have to acknowledge that culture is a huge driver for this. It's interesting to me. In the time that myself and my other trainers have been training folks over the course of the last 7 to 8 years, and during the time that I was teaching in higher education, it was really, really interesting to watch every single cycle of 18 and 19-year-olds. And I taught in higher education for about 15 years and worked also in the back end of those spaces. It was really interesting to watch how every single year a new crop of individuals with a new perspective and new assumptions and new expectations would walk through our doors, not the same ones as the ones before. And by the way, you had to be on the cutting edge of this every 9 months. When I used to tell supervisors, when I used to tell folks that, people would say, well, that's insane, hey son, like we can't be changing our business communication styling. We can't even be changing our personal styling once every 9 months. I actually had a supervisor sit across the table from me one time, and she said, why can't people just suck it up and come to work? What's wrong with them? And I said, well, they asked the same question about you. Why can't you suck it up and change? Generational assumptions and expectations create friction, right? And I lay it at the feet of generations, but it's really about attitudes. It's really about mindsets. It's really about expectations. And this is the reason why the rise in workplace incivility has been so rapid and so steep. Culture is shifting outside of work, and people are bringing that culture into work, whether we like it or not, no matter what our opinion may be of that culture. And we all have opinions, by the way. I do, you do, everybody does. As leaders, as managers and supervisors, as individuals tasked with making sure that the very delicate gossamer that is effective communication, making sure that that gossamer stays put together on a team, and making sure that that gossamer becomes a glue, which then becomes a concrete that binds team members together. It's our responsibility to monitor these areas. It's our responsibility to monitor life. It's our responsibility to monitor change, and it's our responsibility to monitor culture as they impact work and as they impact how civil or incivil we are in the work environment. All right, so those are some big reasons for the rise of workplace incivility. Those are reasons why workplace incivility actually continues to occur. And at this point, I'd like to be able to, well, not be able to, I'd like to take a break with you. And so what I want to do is I want to share with you an idea that I've got around a product and a service I think that will probably help you. Not probably help you, it will help you. It will help your leaders become more effective. It will help your leaders become more, better at dealing with these kinds of environments. It will help them become better at dealing with these kinds of issues. And so I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce you to our very new product, Leading Keys. Hsct's all-new, on-demand leadership development solution for your managers, your supervisors, and your team. Leading Keys is our high-tech, touchless solution for your modern, remote leadership training needs. We're on your managers and supervisors' device, whether they are at home, at work, or even at play. Leading Keys features 50-plus platform videos of robust leadership training content, asynchronous, interactive learning via email and chat, remote training with customized platform-based webinars, robust dashboard and reporting functions to track usage, learner competencies, and more, and real live chat support from real live human beings. Leading Keys is more than just another learning management software solution that you buy and then shelve. Leading Keys aligns perfectly with your team, grows with your organization, and ultimately makes you a better leader. Get in touch with us today to schedule a demo so we can show you around the platform and get 10% off your first year with promo code HASON. Check out our website at www.leadingkeys.com or give us a call at 1-833-216-8296 or email our client relationship success manager, Cindy McInerney, at sales@leadingkeys.com. Leading Keys, the on-demand leadership development solution tomorrow for your team today. And we're back. So I would encourage everyone here to check out Leading Keys. It is a great product. We're very proud to have it. We're very proud to have developed that. We spent the last 8 months of last year of 2019 really developing that platform. And one of the topic areas that we cover on that platform is workplace incivility. We actually talk really extensively about how to make your environments more civil, and what are the step-by-step processes that will allow you to do that very successfully. And of course, each one of the modules is designed to be bite-sized. So it's really focused on micro learning, right? It's focused on getting as much learning as possible to you in as bite-sized a form as we possibly can, but making that bite-sized learning actionable. All right, cool. So take a look at that on leadingkeys.com, and I would encourage you to take advantage of that promo code today. All right, so sort of our switch, right, that we're going into in the next part of our conversation here today, we're really going to look at what are some of the warning signs, right, of incivility. Because at this point, you might be saying, okay, hey, son, I got it. You know, there's been generational changes. There's differences in assumptions and expectations. There's differences in communication patterns. Sure, I get it. It's low-level deviant behavior, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but so what? Like, my team communicates really, really well, or I'm a leader. I've never seen anything like this before, or well, yeah, I mean, I've seen issues of workplace incivility, but you know what? People always work that out between each other, right? I mean, hey, son, aren't you making a mountain out of a molehill? I mean, really, like, Is this really a big deal? I mean, yeah, so what? There's stuff on social media. So what? There's stuff on TV. So what? There's stuff in the movies. That doesn't impact how people show up at work. You're crazy. Well, I wish I were, right? I wish those things didn't have an impact. However, they do. And so here are some of the ways that you may want to look for, the warning signs, right? And what are the key warning signs of incivility in your workplace? So we're going to break these down step by step. So the first warning sign of incivility in the workplace, in civil communication, and by the way, in civil communication can include everything from gossiping and storytelling all the way to abusive language, dysfunctional communication, anger. Anger is a huge driver for a lot of incivility. There are a number of angry people at work, and well, quite frankly, they're not communicating in a way that honors other folks' humanity. And of course, a lack of understanding of how to navigate conflict just in general. All of these areas contribute to the stew of an unintentional work environment. They contribute to an environment where people are just doing stuff, where they're not being necessarily led effectively, where they're not even being checked. And I just move my elbow sort of metaphorically there, or they're not being checked by their leadership. As a matter of fact, their leadership may be engaging in the very types of dysfunctional, poor, and toxic communication behavior that lead to workplace incivility in the first place. There may not be any good role modeling, and in an unintentional work environment, that's a key warning sign. When myself and other consultants who work with us here at Hsct go into or are invited into workplace environments in order to discuss, in order to tackle, in order to put our arms around this aspect, this thing called workplace incivility, one of the first things that we look at is how intentional is the work environment? How are people communicating with each other? Are they communicating in casual throwaway fashion, or are they communicating carefully and with thought? And yes, by the way, this is every communication interaction. Every communication interaction either leads to an intentional work environment or it leads to an unintentional work environment. And again, most unintentional workplace environments are defined by dysfunctional communication, abusive language, the toleration of poor communication behaviors, ignoring anger and outbursts of inappropriate behavior, and even a lack of understanding of how conflict actually escalates. And by the way, you see this when conflict actually escalates out of control. All of these elements come together to support work environments, to create work environments that allow incivility to actually take root. The second key warning sign that I see, and that my folks here see, and that we see here at Human Services Consulting and Training, the second key warning sign that we see that is surely indicative of there being an incivil environment is an element of, or a lack of, not an element of, a lack of low trust, right? Oh, I shouldn't say a lack of, the presence of, there we go, the presence of low trust in the work environment. Low trust environments are work environments that are riddled with basically the signs of a lack of accountability. So covering your tail, making excuses, okay, not delivering on work product, or delivering on it in a poor quality fashion. Engaging in low-level conflict, right? Conflict that occurs below the attention level of leadership, right? Very often when we go into low trust work environments here at HSCT, one of the questions we'll ask leaders is, how do you deal with conflict here? How do you deal with incivility? And the big warning bell goes off when those leaders, when those individuals say things like, oh, conflict doesn't happen here, or, oh, we all get along, or, and this is my personal favorite, oh, we're all like family. Wow, really? You're like family? Okay, so do you trust each other like family? Do you care about each other like family? Do you love each other like family? In low trust work environments where there is an absence of trust, there is a presence of fear. Look, low trust environments, conflict ridden environments, even if that conflict is submarined, and environments that support, whether tacitly or overtly, bullying and harassing behaviors are spaces where incivility can grow. It is leaders' responsibilities to build trust in their environment. Trust is built step by step, moment by moment, interaction by interaction. Trust doesn't build through just one traumatic event where everybody binds together. Trust doesn't build through just one disruption where everybody's forced into one spot together. Trust doesn't build on one project that is successful and magically works. That's not how trust is built. The author and coach and speaker Simon Sinek talks about, in a very compelling way, far more compelling than me, talks in a very compelling way about how trust builds step by step, moment by moment, day by day, and can be destroyed in an instant. It can be destroyed through a lack of communication. It can be destroyed through a lack of understanding. And then it takes a long time, of course, to rebuild that. Many leaders, many managers and supervisors, many organizations, many frontline workers, many executive individuals, right? Folks in the C-suite don't like hearing this answer. They want to hear that trust builds instantly and that we'll all just trust each other because, like, the organization said so. That's not how human beings work. That's never been how human beings work. It takes me a long time to trust you. I have to take your measure. I have to look at you. I have to observe not only your behavior, but also your attitudes and your postures. I have to listen to the words that come out of your mouth, and then I have to see the actions that follow from those words. In low trust environments, actions and words are at a mismatch. People are confused. Followers are confused. The team is confused. What are we doing here? And that is a key warning sign where incivility can grow, because then every person, every man, every woman inside of that environment becomes their own leader doing their own thing. Now, there are 7 key warning signs of incivility. I'm going to break each one of these down. And on your participant handout that I put up there in the group chat, if you went ahead and clicked download, you have that on your computer right now. And that should be on the bottom of the very first page. There are 7 warning signs of incivility. And a lot of these, sort of encompass everything that we've talked about here today. So one of the big warning signs of incivility is ignoring the feelings of others. If you're writing things down or if you're typing things up, you can write the words lack of empathy, lack of care. Now, empathy feels like a soft word, right? Empathy feels like something that, like, we would say maybe nurses do or social workers do. I work in a manufacturing environment, Hassan, or I work in a high pressure sales environment, or I work in a high pressure legal environment, or I work in a high pressure manufacturing environment. We don't have time for empathy. We have to get product out. We don't have time to care about people because people are easy to get. Well, ignoring the feelings of others is a sure way to ensure that there will be incivility. We don't actually know why this happens, but we think that there are behavioral and social cues. The neurobiology is beginning to come along with this. The science, by the way, that knows what actually works for human beings, and then there's what business does. Dan Pink talked about this mismatch in his great TED Talk on the science of motivation. But when we know a little bit more about why social cues are so powerful, we will then understand a little bit more about why ignoring the feelings of others just one time has a domino effect on the team. But we can see it right now. We can see that this kind of behavior, this kind of ignoring the feelings of others, has a deep impact and encourages incivility. Okay, the second warning sign is engaging in childish behavior. Now, childish behavior and childlike behavior are 2 different things, and you can write that down on your handout or type that up on your Microsoft Word document, or if you're listening, and I hope that grabbed your attention, right? Engaging in childish behavior is different than engaging in childlike behavior. Let me give you the example, right, that proves the rule. When a grown person engages in childish behavior, like pouting or throwing tantrums, engages in behavior that shows that they have no control over their sort of internal mechanisms, we don't think it's cute or funny. Actually, we stop thinking it's cute or funny right after a person's like 4 years old. As a matter of fact, the behavioral scientists will tell you, and as well as childhood behavioral scientists will tell you, that If a child is not not necessarily fully in control, but able to navigate their world by the time they're 4 years old, they have trouble making friends. As a matter of fact, they go down the road towards being antisocial quite quickly. That's childish behavior. We don't even tolerate childish behavior in children, much less in adults. Childlike behavior, on the other hand, is the behavior of curiosity. It's the behavior of discovery. It's the behavior of wanting to know what's around the corner. It's the behavior of genuine care. It's the behavior of giving selflessly. That's childlike behavior. Note like, not actual child, right? Childlike behavior. So childish behavior and allowing childish behavior to occur in a work environment is one of the warning signs of incivility. The third warning sign of incivility is a low level of motivation. So when you go onto a team, or when we walk into a team-based environment and we see that individuals are listless, or that they are saying things like, I'm just punching the clock, or when they pull out their cell phones, they have a countdown clock. I worked with one time with a municipality one time, and at that municipality, I talked to, interestingly enough, an individual who was in a supervisory role, and he said something very interesting to me. He said, "Hey, son, I don't know what you're doing here. I don't even know why they brought you in. You're wasting your time. See this? I'm counting down the days to retirement. There's nothing you can do to tell me, and there's nothing you can do to change me. So I don't even know why you showed up." That was a big, big red flag. And that individual was a supervisor in a leadership position. I think he probably still has a countdown clock on his phone. When individuals have a low level of motivation, when they are more motivated to leave, when they are more motivated to disengage from the team than they are motivated to engage in the team, that is a warning sign that incivility might be lurking at the door. Number 4, lack of focus on work, easily distractible, right? Not really thinking too much about my work. I'm thinking about a whole bunch of other different things. Now, interestingly enough, in our time now, and I want to do a little bit of a riff on this for a couple of moments, the time in which we live now, right, where we're all working, or many of us are working from home, maybe not all of us, but many of us are still working from home. Many of us are now working in environments that we could never have imagined us working in, maybe even 6 months ago, and working in ways we never could have imagined 6 months ago. As we are moving in this direction, as we have rapidly been pushed into this direction through the coronavirus pandemic, through COVID-19, through economic shutdowns, and through lockdowns, through enforced social distancing orders, and of course, through businesses deciding that, well, I can get the work done remotely, and we can get the work done remotely, we may be easily distractible. We may have, we always at work had, 4 screens open, but now you're at home. So not only do you have the 4 screens open, but you got the kids running around in the background, and you've got, the lawn guy coming over, you got the cat running here, you got the laundry going here. And so it's tough for many folks to navigate their home environment, as their home environment has been turned into a work environment. There's nothing wrong with your home environment being your work environment. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, as the number of distractions goes up, as the level of focus, the level of ability to dial in goes down, well, you're going to see an increase in workplace incivility. You're going to see an increase in incivil communications, because we're going to get impatient. I need you to do this now. Well, why? Because I didn't have enough time, because I was distracted and over here and I didn't plan. And so now it's a you problem. Well, that's rude. I've been planning all day for this. Well, I don't really care. Get it done now. We've created the environments without, of course, pulling apart those environments and being really intentional about what work from home actually looks like. Now, we're kind of sort of turning the corner on that now at this time. And as of this recording, we're approaching the end of the third quarter in the business cycle in 2020 at the time of this recording. And so, I think that some of that's going to change. We are looking at some trend lines that show that is going to change as people become more familiar with work from home, as people become more familiar with managing those distractions. But any place where people have a lack of focus or are easily distractible, that sets the table for workplace incivility. Okay, last couple. Technology overload. Technology overload can lead to workplace incivility. Too many systems, too many processes. And actually, I'm going to double down on this. In a time of remote work, if you are micromanaging, if you're a leader on this webinar, or you're watching this recording later on, and you are micromanaging your team through the use of technology, you are almost guaranteeing that they will be uncivil. Maybe not necessarily directly to you, but that they will be uncivil in their commentary. They will be uncivil in their emails. They will be uncivil in their direct messaging and instant messaging. I'm seeing a trend line towards managers and supervisors trying to take their micromanaging behavior, their desire to know almost everything that an individual is doing, and translating that into technology. And of course, technology offers many options and opportunities for people to engage in micromanaging each other. I mean, just with a webcam and Zoom, which is how we're recording this webinar today, if I say that the culture of this team, let's say all of you on the webinar are on my team, right? The culture of this team is that we will all have our cameras on at 9 o'clock. We will keep our cameras on all day. What am I saying to the team? Well, I'm saying that this technology is going to overload your good sense. I'm saying that this technology, this ability to monitor you right through your webcam, this ability to see what you're doing in your house, well, I'm communicating to you that I don't trust you. And remember, I said a low trust work environment is rife with the ability, it's rife with the conditions for incivility to arise. So technology overload, too many emails, too much messaging, too much micromanaging via technology, right? Not understanding that as work goes more remote, you actually need to provide more space for people to do more work that matters, because there are more distractions, because they are managing more things. Many leaders, many managers and supervisors don't fully comprehend this. They don't fully wrap their arms around this in ways that are beneficial for their team. All right, 2 more key takeaways, and then we'll summarize all these together. Poor role modeling of what would be effective behavior. So poor role modeling of what would be effective behavior is also a warning sign of incivility. So here's poor role modeling of effective behavior. Let's say any one of you on the call are on my team right now, and on the recording are on my team right now. And let's say that any of you are behaving incivilly. If I go to you and I seek to guilt you or socially shame you, well, that's ineffective communication behavior. That doesn't work, right? And then I go to the next person and I try to guilt and shame them, and you see me do that. That's poor role modeling of ineffective behavior. It's also poor role modeling of effective behavior, because here's the effect I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to stop doing the thing that I want you to do, which is I want you to stop behaving incivilly, and I want you to stop communicating in an incivil fashion, and I want you to treat people with empathy. But then I didn't do that with you. I didn't role model the thing that I wanted to happen effectively. And to make matters worse, then what I did was I created an even more low trust environment, because I behaved unintentionally. See how all these things line up and collapse together. Finally, passive aggressive behavior. Passive aggressive behavior is always a key warning sign of incivility. Where there is passive aggressive behavior, whether it's passive aggressive behavior via in-person communication, whether it's passive-aggressive behavior via technology-based communication like emails or direct messaging or Slack messaging or something like that, or even video conferencing, where there is passive-aggressive responses, passive-aggressive behavior, where that is not necessarily a one-off or a two-off, those things are kind of normal in the way that human beings communicate, where there is a pattern of passive-aggressive behavior consistently over time, well, for sure, there is an environment where incivility is being allowed to grow and being allowed to metastasize, which of course will lead to other kinds of behavior like anger-based behavior, bullying-based behavior, and harassment and harassing behavior. Look, all of these signs, these warning signs of incivility, are key to understand. It's also key to understand that the creation of unintentional work environments and unintentional or accidental leadership can lead to workplace incivility. And finally, it's key to understand that where there are environments where there is no trust, well, then you're going to have incivility. Look, you need trust in order to make any of this happen, and you need trust in order to make any of these skills work. And trust is the coin of the realm. Where there are fewer people doing work that matters, trust matters more. Where there are more people doing work that matters, trust matters even more than that. But trust is hard to scale, right? It's almost impossible to scale. But it is the only thing, quite frankly, that human beings, and particular leaders, need to drive on in order to have success in battling and in combating and in confronting even workplace incivility. All right, so I want to share with you another video. So I want to bring that up. And the next video that I want to share with you is one that's really focused around this idea of how do you get this kind of information to the people who need it? How do you get this kind of information to the people who are in an environment where, well, quite frankly, maybe they haven't heard of this information? How do you get this information to people who know they need it, they want it, but they're not quite sure how to apply it? And of course, if you have a company, you have an organization, you have a small and medium-sized business where, maybe you've had these kinds of troubles before, and maybe you've had a struggle with getting your employees, getting your managers, getting your leaders to really understand that this stuff is really important, and we'd really like you to focus on it. In a time of COVID-19, and in particular, if you've had trouble sort of navigating the vagaries of not only COVID-19, but also the vagaries of figuring out, what are the best ways to work with folks? Well, if you've had trouble with that, here at Human Services Consulting and Training, we've got something for you. Look, we love doing customized work, right? We love doing work that really matters for people in a customized space. And so I want you to take a look at our customized offerings here and take a listen to what we can offer you with our remote training options. In a time of COVID-19, social distancing, and remote work, how are you going to upskill your managers and supervisors? In a time of workplace disruption, declining training budgets, and diminishing bandwidth, how are you going to maintain your team's tactical edge over the competition? We know you're exhausted from webinars that don't work, Zoom meetings that are just about talking heads, and we know you don't want to download another white paper on leadership for your team that they won't even bother to read. Hsct has a solution with our customized remote training solutions. Here's how it works. 1, you tell us what you need for your team. From change management to performance reviews, we've trained folks on it all. Number 2, we work with you to determine budget, length, and delivery platform. Number 3, our remote facilitators interactively deliver your content tailored to your team's leadership development needs live. Number 4, we record your training, turn around your recording, and get it back to you within 4 to 6 weeks. And that's it. Your team is trained, your team is energized, and your team is ready to engage with this new world we're all living in with leadership skills that last a lifetime. Hsct's customized remote training solutions feature a tiered pricing structure that fits your organizational budget. Leadership topics customized for your deep organizational needs. Qualified remote trainers with a combined 20 plus years of training experience. Our customized remote training solutions can be delivered via Zoom, Cisco WebEx, GoToMeeting, or Skype, and can be combined with personalized coaching calls so you know they are implemented and you know the insights work. Get in touch with us today to schedule a conversation so we can walk you through our process. Check out our website at www.hsconsultingandtraining.com for a list of our webinar topics, or give us a call at 1-833-216-8296, or email us at info@hsconsultingandtraining.com, and we'll get back to you to begin a conversation today. Here at HSCT, we innovate on people. We do innovate on people. We really, I was asked to talk about that actually a couple of days ago with a potential client, and really wanted to elaborate on that idea. And he was very curious about that. He said, how is it that you innovate on people? What exactly does that mean? And I said, here's what it means. It means that most organizations innovate on technology, right? They put the technology first, ahead of the person. They say, oh, well, this technological tool here or this technological tool there, that is going to be the thing that's going to bring us to our zenith. That's going to bring us to our peak of success, right? And what we say here at Human Services Consulting and Training, what we assert is that you can train as many people as you want with technology. You can convert as many people as you want to being technological beings. You can even bring on as much technology as you like. But at the end of the day, you're going to need a human being to do the work. You're going to need a human being to connect. You're going to need a human being to create the kinds of cultures, to create the kinds of innovations, to create the kinds of environments that are going to allow the best work possible to get out the door. And this is where we need to innovate. Look, we just make better leaders here. That's what we're focused on. We're focused not only on telling you how to do things that actually work, but also sometimes on telling you hard truths that you need to hear. And so our remote training products are really designed to get across these ideas in a way that's customized for your organization. So I'd encourage you to check us out at hsconsultingandtraining.com. Our remote trainers do have a combined 20 plus years of experience. I was a former trainer, and we'll talk about Leadership Toolbox and some other offers later on. But I was a former trainer. I've got a lot of folks underneath me who are working with me, who are trainers. And so we would love to come into your organization, and we would love to help you out on any topic that you may need help on. Okay, and building that environment where you can innovate on people through training is hugely important. All right, so getting back to our content here, again, giving you stuff that works. Okay, Hsct, I got the whole thing with like the incivility, and I got the whole thing with how these things happen. Great, cool. You've informed me. Awesome. What do I actually do, right? How do I create an environment where civil communication can occur? How do I create a space, right, for any of this to happen? Because here's the thing, Hsct, I don't want to think about this stuff all the time. I've got too many other things to think about. I got to think about work getting out the door. I got to think about people feeling good about the work getting out the door. Maybe not that. I got to care about my boss feeling good about the work getting out the door. I've got to think about how the heck do I actually meet my quotas and my metrics every year. I've got to think about that. And, it's cool that you're talking about incivility, and it's cool that you're talking about this in a time of remote work, but really, aren't these just issues that adults can work out between themselves? Maybe. But how's that been working for you? Look, the key way to navigate workplace incivility, the key way to kind of nip this problem in the bud, the key thing that most organizations are missing is this. You have to create a civil culture. Culture is the key word, and you can see this in your participant handout. Culture is the key word, and it requires a few things from leaders. Look, the old saying is absolutely true. The fish rots from the head down. And if there is not a civil culture in your team, and by the way, let's talk some turkey here. Many managers and supervisors will talk about how, well, I can't really impact my boss. Okay. I can't really impact the executives in the C-suite. And by the way, they're crazy. They say all kinds of different things, and they're rude in all kinds of different ways, and it's terrible. And I wish that they wouldn't talk like that to my team, but I can't do anything about that, Hassan. It's insane that you're asking me to manage up in that way. Okay, maybe it is insane. How about this? What are you doing with your team? Oh, my team's great. My team's fabulous. My team's awesome. My team is communicating great. There's no incivility problem there at all. Okay. Would they say that if you weren't in the room? What would they say about your leadership style? What would they say about the culture of the team? Would they say the same things about the culture of the team that you say about your boss and about your organization? Creating a civil culture starts with you as a manager and supervisor. It starts with you as the leader of the team. It starts with you first. If your team is a fish, you're the head of it. You're the one, right? It begins there. How we communicate really matters. And so creating a civil culture on teams to combat workplace incivility, this is the first key takeaway, requires leaders to engage with commitment, consistency, and discipline around your own communication style to role model the type of culture you would like to see. Let me give you a couple of examples here. So if your communication style is more brusque and direct, that's fine. But just know that the culture you're going to be creating on your team is going to be a brusque and direct communication style culture. That's going to be the kind of culture that is going to grow. That's going to be the kind of culture that's going to be supported. That's going to be the kind of culture that's going to be encouraged. And when people come on the team who maybe aren't necessarily, really happy or really engaged with a brusque, direct style, they're going to struggle. Sure, they may have something to offer the team, but they're going to struggle. And by the way, they're going to perceive your communication style, your brusqueness and directness, they're going to perceive that as being rude or discourteous. Now, of course, you could say, well, they have to change their perception or they can go find another job. Maybe, or maybe the role of the leader of the team is to shift your communication style. Maybe the primary role of the leader is to subsume themselves and to figure out how to best bring along the entire team. Engaging with commitment, consistency, and discipline means understanding and knowing what your style is, knowing what you'd like to role model, and then, here's the big one, sometimes intentionally going against your own grain. This is really, really hard for leaders to accept. This is really, really hard for people to accept in general. And if you are the leader of any team, I don't care if it's a family, I don't care if it's a workplace team, I don't even care if it's a civic team, right? If you're involved in a local civic organization or a church or something like that, I don't care where you're involved. True leaders evolve when they engage with commitment around changing their own style. It's not built in. Sure, there are elements of it that are hardwired into you. And yes, when you're stressed, you're going to revert back to a baseline that's very, very familiar. But for 99% of your communication style, to create a civil culture, you must engage with commitment, discipline, and consistency intentionally over time to create that civil culture that you would like to see, if you genuinely want to see it. All right, number 2, in order to create a civil culture, you must engage with ownership around your own behavior first, and then ask other people to own theirs. Sometimes this gets into the sticky area of apologies. Sometimes this gets into the sticky area of admitting culpability. Sometimes this gets into the sticky area of admitting responsibility. But look, here's the thing. If you want teams to take on ownership, then you're going to have to do that. If you want teams to take on accountability, then you're going to have to take on accountability first. If you want teams to avoid accountability, well, they're going to see you avoid it and they're going to avoid it. If you want teams to engage in ownership around conflict and conflict outcomes, you're going to have to do that. Look, it's a very simple principle. If you want to create a civil culture, you're responsible for what comes out of other folks' mouths. I know, I just said something radical there. If you want to create a civil culture, you're responsible for what comes out of other folks' mouths or out of their emails or their Slack messages because you're the leader. It falls on you. Well, hey, son, people have to take responsibility for their own actions. Sure, they do. And so do you. You also have to take responsibility for your own inaction. Engaging with ownership shows people that you are actually trustworthy, that you're actually insightful, and that you're actually intentional. This is sometimes really hard, again, for leaders to wrap their arms around. But if you want to create a civil culture, this is a step-by-step, moment-by-moment thing. And I would not recommend biting off more than you could chew initially. I would not recommend saying, I'm going to change, 10 years or 15 years or 20 years of an incivil culture. I'm going to change this right now. No, actually, you're not. It's water on the rock. And it starts with commitment and ownership. That's the two big drips right there. The third big drip on the rock of incivility, the water of civility on the rock of incivility, the third big drip that will start to erode that rock is to engage with confronting. Engage with confronting and diffusing incivility through creating robust communication expectations, repeating them constantly, and changing them only when absolutely necessary. Look, the number of leaders that I talk to who are managers and supervisors in small and medium-sized businesses who almost never visit expectations other than maybe once or twice a year is astonishing to me. Now, you may say to me, and many managers and supervisors say this, many leaders say this to me and say this to human services consulting and training. They say this to us. They say, well, hey, son, we revisit expectations all the time. We're constantly talking about expectations. Sure you are. You're constantly talking about expectations around product. You're constantly talking about expectations around the customer. You're constantly talking about expectations around the organization. You're constantly talking about expectations around quality. You're constantly talking about expectations around what actually gets produced that goes out the door. But you're not constantly talking about expectations around how we treat each other. You're not constantly talking about expectations around how we confront each other. You're not talking about expectations constantly about how we engage with each other. Do we do this? Do we not do that? Look, expectations are huge. And when you confront, that creates a series of expectations. Robust communication expectations are the types of expectations that allow you to engage with confronting. Now, let me be clear on this. Confronting in and of itself does not have to lead to conflict. Let me repeat that for all of the folks in the back of the room on the webinar. Engaging with confronting in and of itself does not have to lead to conflict. At every stage in confrontation and in conflict, each party has decisions to make and has agency in those decisions. You as a leader choose whether or not to follow the escalation path with the other party in a confrontation. You as the leader choose how to confront, what words, what approach, what environment, what platform, what direction. You as a leader choose the ground that you decide to go in to the confrontation on. The same way the other party who might be engaged in incivil behavior chooses that as well. This can be really hard. We're going to talk about this in our key takeaways section here coming up in a little bit. But one of the big things that I see leaders failing on when they seek to confront people around incivil behavior, and the reason why they get so skittish around it, is they fail to have a plan of any kind. They don't know how to confront. Or they falsely believe that confrontation will somehow inevitably lead to conflict, as thus they avoid confrontation altogether, just kind of hoping that somehow magically things will get better. Now, as a purveyor of conflict management, as a practitioner of mediation, I can tell you that things don't just get better by themselves. I can tell you for a fact that things don't just improve on their own. We have to be intentional about that improvement. We have to be intentional about how we engage with that improvement, and we have to be intentional about how we move people towards confronting each other better. When we have robust communication expectations, When we repeat those communication intentions constantly, right, those communication expectations constantly, and when we change them, but only when absolutely necessary, then we build a structure that's actually committed and solid and consistent. One of the key spaces where incivility can actually really develop, and it develops along fault lines, one of the key spaces where dysfunctional communication, gossip, where those kinds of behavior, storytelling, particularly negative storytelling, really pops up. The key places where those pop up are in fault lines, in which I deal with one person one way, one person another way, and one person another way. And by the way, I'm not talking about in sort of a casual interaction kind of way of dealing with folks. I'm talking about that. I'm talking about when things are serious, when things are going to become serious. If I'm not consistent in how I deal with people, and by I just mean I as the universal I, the leader I, the manager, supervisor I, the organizational I, if I'm not consistent, if I rely on the ability, if I rely on the cover of inconsistency to allow me to do things that benefit me as the leader, the manager, the supervisor, the organization, if I do that, then I'm being inconsistent fundamentally. And people, by the way, pick up on that. The environment then becomes low trust. And then we create incivil cultures, almost unintentionally, but actually quite intentionally. Look, if you want to create a civil culture in your workplace, if you want to create a civil culture in your work team, engage with commitment, consistency, and discipline. Role model the kind of behavior that you want to see. Engage with ownership around your behavior, and then ask other people to own theirs. And finally, engage with confronting, but only after you've established robust expectations, you've repeated them constantly. You've actually said out loud, this is what we expect here. This is how we behave here in these critical areas. Creating environments where civil communications can occur is not easy. I wish it were. It is a grind. It is a step-by-step, moment-by-moment, interaction by interaction thing. And for leaders, some leaders, it can be too much. For some managers and supervisors, it can be too much. Some of what I'm saying seems overwhelming. That's only because you haven't tried it before. So if it seems overwhelming, I would encourage you to do the small things. Revisiting what Simon Sinek said in the past, and Dan Pink and other folks who are way smarter than me have said and have wrote in books like Thinking Fast and Slow and Leaders Eat Last, right? In books like that you can go and get at your local bookstore or get online from your favorite online bookseller, they talk in depth about how do you break down these kinds of things that I'm talking about in what seems like big broad strokes. But one of the things that they all consistently say is this: if you want to create a culture, and I would argue if you want to create a civil culture, a culture of civil growth-based communication, if you want to do that, you must engage with the small things first. The small things are things that matter. They are things that are sometimes feel, they sometimes feel as though they are throwaway acts, but they aren't really. Small acts of kindness, small acts of civility, small acts of commitment, small acts of consistency, small acts of role modeling, small acts of engaging around communication expectations in a consistent way, small acts of ownership build up over time. It's never the big things that create a civil culture, just like it's not the big things that create an uncivil culture. Usually the big things come about after a whole series of small things have been committed to consistently over time, until they become ingrained communication behavior, ingrained leadership behavior, ingrained team and organizational behavior. Remember, I opened this entire section by saying the fish rots from the head down, right? And I made the point that sphere of influence is hugely important. Well, how are you committing as a leader? How are you committing as a manager and supervisor? How are you engaging in ownership and confronting inside of your sphere of influence? How are you doing that? Is it working? Is it not working? Is it good? Is it bad? Does it feel like you're overwhelmed? It probably does. Look, one of the key things that we have to understand is that these kinds of ways of engaging, these kinds of ways of creating a civil culture, these kinds of ways of creating the types of environments that we want to see don't happen just by themselves. They don't happen just,
sometimes as a leader.
They don't happen just, when we sort of just want them to. They happen because we're actually intentional about them. They happen because we actually think them through, and they happen because we have help. One of the key things that we do here at Hsct is we offer people the opportunity to engage in all kinds of different ways that really matter. And our final commercial coming up here today is a commercial for our Leadership Toolbox Masterclass. When you hear the word masterclass, you think, oh my gosh, that's something for executives, or that's just something for folks in the C-suite, or that's just something for folks that have bigger degrees, right, with letters after their name. No. A masterclass is designed for you. So if you're on this webinar today, if you're watching it later on, and you're thinking, how could I get better at all this incivility stuff? How can I get better at the small stuff? Because, that is going to require me to pull apart my entire leadership style. You're correct. And here at Human Services Consulting and Training, we have a product that will help you do that. So I would like to introduce you, if I can, to our Leadership Toolbox.
You need more interaction, more depth, more enlightenment. To develop as a leader, you need more insight than a book or a podcast episode can deliver, more high touch than a webinar or a virtual event can deliver, and just, quite frankly, more. To give you more, I'm launching the Hsct Leadership Toolbox Masterclass. Based on my 7+ years of delivering live in-person leadership training experiences to supervisors, managers, and executives, and based in a practical history of training 15,000+ people, I developed the Hsct Leadership Toolbox Masterclass to bring you what I've learned over my years of leadership development. The Hsct Leadership Toolbox Masterclass is designed with you in mind. It features 12 live leadership development webinars delivered over the course of 2 hours, 2 times per month for 6 months, covering the following leadership topic areas: conflict management, dealing with difficult people, boosting team morale, adapting to change, and managing the multi-generational workforce, and much, much more. 12+ guides, handouts, and toolkits designed to help you get better long after the masterclass has closed and ended. 4 personal leadership coaching Zoom calls for 90 minutes per month, where you get to pick my brain directly and ask me the most difficult questions that you really couldn't ask in the actual masterclass itself. And finally, 2 free tickets to my virtual January 2021 Leadership Retreat event. We're very excited. We're putting this together. It'll give you an opportunity to interact with other leaders, to discuss insights, and to gain deeper wisdom. This is an over $3,000 value, and I'm giving it to you today for only $497 per person. This is unbelievable. I would never discount something this low. But in a time of COVID-19, in a time of virtual transition, and in a time of remote work, I know that you need to be a better leader, and I want to walk along with you, walk alongside you to make you a better leader, with no fluff, no waste of your time, and nothing that isn't practical, tactical, and applicable to your team, your organization, and your leadership approach right now. Get in touch with me today to schedule a conversation so I could walk you through the process and sign you up for the Hsct Leadership Toolbox Masterclass. Check out our website at www.hsconsultingandtraining.com/leadership toolbox for a list of our leadership masterclass topics, or give me a call at 1-833-216-8296, or email me directly at jsorrells, SORRELLS, at hsconsultingandtraining.com, and I'll get back to you to start our conversation. I built Hsct to innovate on people. Let's help you innovate on people as a leader now.
Like I said, built this thing to help you, built this thing to innovate on people, right? And the Leadership Toolbox Masterclass is an excellent opportunity to get with me directly. It's an excellent opportunity to really engage with me in the kinds of ways that, well, we really can't do necessarily maybe in a customized remote training or even via our Leading Keys platform. It's really an awesome opportunity, and I would encourage you to take advantage of it. So head on over to hsconsultingandtraining.com or just email me directly, jsorrells at hsconsultingandtraining.com. I can walk you through the Leadership Toolbox Masterclass. Okay. So we've kind of gotten to, sort of thinking about, okay, so we've got, how do we create a civil culture? We understand where incivility comes from. We understand why it's a problem. We understand how we can get better at confronting it and engaging with it. We understand the importance of role modeling. We understand the importance of what we have to do in order to shift things around, right? So what's the practical, tactical thing here, Hassan? What's the thing we can do today? Well, here's the thing that we can do today. Here's the 5 steps if you want to change a team culture around this area of workplace incivility. Step number 1. I cannot encourage you anymore around workplace incivility, and I can't encourage you more. That's not really how I want to frame it. I want to say it this way. In order to change a team culture, you must have a plan. That's how I want to say it. You must have a plan. If you have no plan, if you watch this webinar, if you watch this recording later on, if you read a blog post or you get an online guide or resource from our organization, from Hsct, and you read a book or you listen to a podcast episode or you watch a video on YouTube and then you don't apply it, well, that's because you had no plan. So if you actually want to confront workplace incivility, even at the smallest level, I would encourage you to have a plan. That's your first step to changing a team culture. If you have no plan, you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, as the Cheshire Cat would say in Alice in Wonderland, then it doesn't really matter which direction you go in. Number 2, if you are engaging with somebody who is incivil, who is rude, who has a history of being angry, who has a history of harassing behavior, who has a history of bullying behavior, if you are about to go into the abattoir, if you're about to go into the ring, if you're about to step up to this person, don't approach them alone if you're afraid. Don't approach a person you're comfortable with alone. I never encourage people to confront alone. I encourage people to confront in pairs. Now, if you are confident, if you believe that, this is just another thing that I do during my day, this is just another task on my to-do list, okay, you may want to confront them alone. But you may want to bring along another individual anyway, because there might be some human resources repercussions. There might be some civil repercussions. There might be some litigious repercussions. And of course, you want somebody there to be able to help you out and maybe even pull you back from the cliff if you go overboard. Okay. Now, these are kind of a little bit out of order in comparison to what's in your participant handout, but I want to jump down to the 4th bullet point there before I talk about documentation. Address behaviors, not people. So this is something that's really important when you're seeking to change in civil behavior, right? A lot of times people merge behavior and human beings together. They merge behavior and culture together. They say you are what you eat, right? Or they say you are what you do. And maybe to a certain degree, that's correct, but to another degree, it's not. One of the key things that I had to learn as a young mediator and negotiator, and by young, I just mean like, not having any experience. One of the first things I had to learn was separate people from their positions. This is something that most folks find incredibly hard to understand and incredibly hard to contemplate, that you want to separate a person from their positions, but you do. You want to think about who the person is, but you want to really dial in on their behavior. This is what you did. This is what I observed. This is the outcome of that, without a judgment on who they are as a person. Because maybe it was just a bad day, or maybe it was a whole series of bad days. Maybe there's some other issues going on. Maybe they need anger management classes. Maybe they had a trauma that happened to them that they're dealing with. Maybe they've got things going on inside of them that you don't know anything about. And when you begin to address their identity, you are this thing. This thing is you. The team believes this thing is you. Then people become defensive. People say, oh, okay, I'm uncivil. Oh, okay, I'm engaged in dysfunctional communication. Oh, okay, let me double down. And there's a very specific kind of person, and actually, I'm going to do a shout out here on a resource to Bill Eddy, EDDY. If you are watching this later on, or if you're on the webinar right now, you may want to go up and look up his resources on dealing with high conflict people. High conflict people are people who are not just driven by conflict. They're not just driven by the presence of conflict. It actually defines who they are as people. And one of the interesting things is in workplace environments where high conflict people are confronted, not on behavior, but on who they are as people, or where that line isn't clear by the person doing the confronting, whether that's a manager or supervisor or a leader in another role, where that distinction isn't made clear in the Confrontation Act, those high conflict people tend to double down and become more high conflict. They don't actually change their behavior, because it's so tightly linked into their identity. So you can go on to Bill Eddy's websites around high conflict people, narcissism, anger, dysfunctional communication, and check out all those resources there. It's way too deep for us to be talking about really much more than that today. All right. I'm going to go down to the fifth bullet point here on the slide. Have a list, right? List all of the behaviors. Again, not people. List the examples of previous behaviors that you found problematic, that were uncivil. Most people, when you start listing the behaviors, don't really know what to say. Now, maybe you might run across a few folks who will be really defensive about every single one of them, or have an explanation for every single one of them. But most people, if you give them usually 5 to 10 examples of uncivil behavior, usually most people go, wow, I didn't really know it was that bad. Most people become introspective. Most people become open to change. So have a list, right? Where I see sometimes managers and supervisors, leaders all fall down, is they have an amorphous idea that this uncivil thing occurred. Kind of have this idea that I heard that you were like talking to these people in a rude way, and that's not a plan. That's barely addressing behavior. Usually they're approaching those individuals one-on-one, and it's not having a list. So they're not changing anything. They're not changing team culture. They're not changing individuals. They're not alerting people to the fact that this might be something that may need to shift. Have a list of specific items. Preferably, if you're documenting days, times, things like that, specific incidences usually are helpful, particularly if you're going to be bringing HR into this. And that gets me into my last bullet point, which is actually the third bullet point on this slide. Document everything. Yeah, document everything in the interaction. Document what you did before. What was our plan of action? What were we going to cover? What were we going to talk about with this individual or with the team? Then document what happens during the interaction. This person said this person said that. No, I feel, we felt, we thought, my opinion was, their opinion was, this person said this person said that. And then document what occurs afterward. And documenting what occurs afterward is really important for follow-up. It's really important for ensuring that people commit to what it is that you're actually asking them to do. And commitment is the coin of the realm when it comes to changing team culture. Commitment is the coin of the realm when it comes to combating workplace incivility. And commitment is the coin of the realm when it comes to developing the kinds of cultures that are civil, where workplace incivility is the lowest level thing we have to confront without allowing it to escalate into anger, inappropriate conflict, further dysfunctional communication, bullying behavior, or even at the top of our ugly behavior pyramid, harassment, right? Sexual, verbal, racial, and otherwise. Okay. We don't want to get to the top of that pyramid, right? We want to do these 5 things. We want to have a plan. We want to not approach folks alone. We want to address behavior, not people. We want to have a list of problematic behaviors that we can point to that is specific. And we want to document everything so that we can ensure follow up and commitment, not only from the other party, but also from ourselves. Because if we're asking folks to commit, we should be documenting, we should be following up with them to make sure that that happens as managers, as supervisors, and as leaders to make sure we're building the most effective thing possible. All right, so we're at the end here of our webinar time today, or we're close to the end of our webinar time here today. I would encourage you to connect with Human Services Consulting and Training around our Leading Keys product. If you're looking for ways to begin the process of upskilling your managers and supervisors around workplace incivility and all the tiny areas that go into combating and confronting workplace incivility, all the way from effective conflict engagement to understanding your own communication style, to managing multi-generational expectations and assumptions, and even adapting to change and disruption. Check us out at leadingkeys.com or give us a call and we will hook you up on that platform. If you need, more help that's maybe in a customized fashion, please check out our remote training products and our remote training offerings and head on over to hsconsultingandtraining.com and take a look at those. Or you could just email us info@hsconsultingandtraining.com or give us a call at 1-833-216-8296 and we'll talk with you about our customized remote training options because maybe you want to address workplace incivility directly. And finally, if you're watching this later on, or if you're watching this right now and you're a manager or supervisor and you're thinking, you know what, I might need some more personalized coaching help. I might need something directly from Hsct. It's not necessarily my team that needs it. It's not necessarily even the organizational culture that needs it. It's something that I need. Well, check out our leadership toolbox. Send me an email about that, and we can talk about what that masterclass looks like for you and how that fits into your budget, how that fits into your overall growth as a leader, and how that can make you better in your sphere of influence on your team and in your organization. All right. With that being said, do we have any questions today from anybody? Either type in the chat or any questions that you'd like to share via your mic. So if you want to give me a question, you can unmute your mic and you can ask me that question about anything that I've said today, or you can just type it up in the chat and I'll go ahead and answer it and riff off of it today. So are there any questions about workplace incivility? Are there any questions about dysfunctional communication? Are there any questions even about confrontation and escalation? Or are there any questions about changing the team culture? All right, that's okay. As my father used to say back in the day, if they're quiet, that means you answered all their questions and you left them wanting more. So that's good. Look, you can always connect with us Human Services Consulting and Training. There's all of our contact information. Please let us help you right in these areas. Look, when you're talking about remote work and remote work environments, these are the kinds of topics, right, that need to be addressed by not only remote leaders, not only managers and supervisors leading newly remote teams, but also managers and supervisors leading hybrid teams, right? Teams that are half remote and half on site, right? And many organizations right now are kind of doing that struggle. They're doing that tug. They're doing that push and pull. And these are spaces, these are gaps, these are fault lines, right, that can grow between teams that can allow workplace incivility to kind of pop up like a weed, right? And you don't want to have that happen. So as a manager, as a supervisor, as a leader, I would encourage you to check out humanservicesconsultingandtraining.com. I would encourage you to check out our Leading Keys product at leadingkeys.com, and let us help you navigate and become a better leader today. All right. Oh, I just saw one question here. Hold on a second. So before I close, I just brought up the chat, just saw one question here. Not a leader. Okay, yes. So this is a great question. What are some suggestions for someone who is not a leader approaching a leader regarding communication? Right. So this is a great question, right? How do you manage up, right? How do you approach somebody and you're not a leader, right? Let's say you're on the team, and let's say it's a team of 5 folks, right? And of those 5 folks, one person's a leader, and then you've got 4 subordinates, and the person who's the leader is a terrible communicator. They're terrible at civility. Maybe they're even engaged in dysfunctional. Let's not go too far. Let's not say they're a bully, but they're engaged in maybe some dysfunctional communication behavior, right? They aren't necessarily being empathetic with their team. And they're not really wrapping their arms around this whole idea of building a civil culture. How do you approach a leader regarding their dysfunctional communication? Well, you would approach them in the exact same way that you would confront a subordinate if they were on your team, or if they were subordinate to you. So the very first thing that you want to do, as we said before, is you want to have a plan for the approach. How exactly are you going to approach this person, right? What's their personality type? What's their, how open are they to suggestion? What's been their pattern of behavior around getting suggestions, right? Number 2, don't approach them alone, right? Bring somebody else from the team with you, right? Where 2 or more go, they will more likely than not be listened to. Okay, so this also gives you an opportunity to have a person from outside check your approach, because you don't want to go to, obviously, to the leader and burn down a whole bunch of bridges and light everything on fire and say, oh, you're terrible, blah, blah, blah. You don't want to do all that, right? So you want to approach that person with a party, with a friend, right? Bring that person along. Number 3, address the behavior, right? Now, this is where it gets tricky when you're addressing the behavior. And by the way, this is why it's important to have a list. On this day, at this time, this behavior. On this day, I saw this thing at this time. Now, here's where you kind of switch it a little bit if you're in that subordinate position. What do you think of this? What's your opinion on this? Or here's an even better way of doing it. How can you help me understand why you did this? And then listen to what they say. Now, if they're a particularly savvy leader, right, they're going to pick up on the fact that you're asking this in the form of a question, and they're going to go, oh, wait, there must be something wrong with me. If they're not particularly savvy, if they are, let's say, dense a little bit, or unaware, or lack self-awareness, right, then they're going to struggle with this, and they might even get a little bit defensive. So this is the spot where you got to be careful. But again, a compelling list of actual behaviors, not judgments on the person, but actual behaviors can really help. And then finally, this is the last thing that I would suggest, and thank you for this question. This is great as we close, and we're a little bit over, but it's okay. The last thing that you're going to want to do is document. Document, particularly on a small team. And the reason why you want to document is this. If that behavior winds up escalating, or winds up coming back on you, or even if the approach winds up coming back on you, and this is a rule from human resources, he or she who has the most documentation in an interaction with human resources wins. And that's a really terrible thing to say, but it's true, right? So he who has the most documentation, or she who has the most documentation, wins. And this is something that's important to consider, because if you don't document, if you just go with the hope that they will change, and then they escalate and they don't change, and then you go and talk about it to human resources, the first question they're going to ask you is, or not even human resources, let's say it doesn't even escalate that far, you go to their boss. The first question that their boss is going to say is, well, what proof do you have? Did you write down anything? And if you didn't write down anything, you're going to go, no, but right. And then you're out, you're dead in the water, right? So documenting before what your interaction is going to look like, during, this person said this person said that, with no feelings or opinions in it, but this person said this, then I said this, and this person said that, and then I said that, and this is the conclusion that we came to, and this was the follow-up. And then after I followed up with this person in this way, and this way, and this way, and they responded in that way, that way, that way, boom, that's your documentation. And that actually helps you later on. Again, if this person boomerangs on you, if you have to go to human resources, or if you wind up at the next stage up of this, going over this person's head to their manager, their boss, their supervisor, their leader, or even the organization itself. All right, that was a great question in the chat. I know it took a little bit longer to answer that question. I appreciate it. Thank you to everybody for coming on to this webinar today. Thank you for everybody for participating and for engaging and for listening. I really do appreciate it. I know I didn't put as many questions in the group chat over there as I probably should have. But this is an area where we sometimes have to absorb information and really think about it. And so this is something to consider. Please also take a look at leadingkeys.com and hsconsultingandtraining.com for more of our research-based leadership resources and development resources that will help you become a better leader. Thank you very much again for your time and attention, and have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. Thank you.